Thank you for being here, really, it means something to have someone listening to my story. I've carried this one in my heart for a long time, maybe too long. But if you're here, it means it's finally time to let it out. I was 24 when it happened, just a girl with a second-hand suitcase and a college degree nobody wanted to see. The job offer came through a friend of a friend, live-in nanny for a widowed billionaire with a temper, a 3-year-old daughter, and a house that looked like a museum. It paid well. I needed the money. So I said yes. What I didn't expect was everything else. The marble house was cold, too clean, too quiet. Every room echoed like it didn't want me in it. And the man who owned it? Logan Blake? He wasn't just rich, he was broken. Sharp. Off limits in every way. And yet, something happened, not all at once. Slowly. In stolen glances and soft arguments. In midnight conversations and tiny acts of kindness. I was supposed to be the help, but life had other plans. Love had other plans, and so did fate. This is the story of how I fell in love, wildly, unexpectedly, and against every rule I thought I'd set for myself. It's the story of what we lost, what we fought for, and what we became. It all started in that house, the one with the marble floors. The first time I saw the house, I thought I'd made a mistake. I had exactly $47 in my bank account when I took the job. I remember that number because I checked it on my cracked phone screen 3 times while sitting on the Greyhound, knees pressed to my chest, a worn-out suitcase between my legs. I was 24, broke, exhausted, and trying very hard not to look like it. The listing had said live-in nanny, discretion required, private estate. The pay was obscene. The job came with room and board, health benefits, and some non-disclosure paperwork that felt more like a secret mission than childcare. But I didn't care. I needed out of my roommate's basement. I needed something, anything, that would pay off my loans and keep me from crawling back to the parents who had already done too much. So, I said yes. The car that picked me up was black and silent inside. The driver didn't say a word, just nodded when I told him my name. Elena Hart. 24. Master's degree in early childhood education, if that still meant anything. It didn't feel like it did. The estate was in Ridgevale, just outside the city. I'd never been that far north before. There were gates, tall, black, and motorized. There was a long, winding driveway with manicured hedges and too many fountains. And then there was the house. It didn't look like a house. It looked like a courthouse. Or a museum. Wide stone steps. Giant white columns. Windows like glossy black eyes, and marble floors. The front door opened before I even stepped onto the porch. A woman in her 40s stood there, tall, perfectly dressed, and already annoyed with me. Her name was Marianne, and I would later learn she ran that house with military precision. "You're early," she said. "I'm sorry," I said. The driver was, "Follow me." She turned on her heel and disappeared inside. No hello. No handshake. Just cold air and the smell of lemon polish. I dragged my suitcase in behind her. The wheels echoed on the marble like gunshots. Every step I took felt too loud. Too wrong. Like the house itself didn't want me there. "This way," she said, not looking back. We passed through hallways that looked like hotel lobbies. Rooms with tall windows, white walls, and nothing out of place. No family photos. No toys. No sign of life. Just perfect silence and polished everything. Finally, she stopped in front of a closed door on the second floor. "Your room," she said. "Thank you," I said. She turned to go, then paused. "The child's name is Sophie. She's 3. You'll be responsible for her daily routine, meals, play, naps, and school readiness. Her father is Mr. Blake. He doesn't like disruptions. Keep that in mind." Mr. Blake, that was the name on the contract. Logan Blake. CEO. Billionaire. Widower, I nodded. Understood. Marianne walked away without another word. I stood in the hallway for a second longer than I should have, staring at the polished wood door that led to my new life. Then I stepped inside. The room was small but beautiful. Neutral colors. Soft bedding. A window that looked out over the back garden. There was even a desk in the corner, and a fresh notepad sitting on it. I sat down on the bed and let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. This was it. A new beginning, no friends. No family. No plan except to survive, keep my head down, and do the job. I didn't know yet that this house was going to change me. That the child I was hired to care for would steal my heart. That her father, the cold, guarded man behind the locked office door, would undo everything I thought I knew about love. At that moment, all I knew was this: the floors were marble. The house was too quiet, and I was very, very far from home. The little girl in pink pajamas, she didn't speak at first. She just looked at me with these big, quiet eyes. Like she'd already learned not to trust the world. The next morning started early. I woke to a soft knock on my bedroom door. It was still dark outside. For a second, I forgot where I was, thought I was back in my old apartment with the leaky ceiling and the smell of someone else's burnt toast. Then I remembered the marble floors. Elena? Marianne's voice came through the door. Yes? I said, sitting up. Breakfast is at 7. Sophie's usually up by 6:30. You'll find her in the playroom at the end of the east hallway. I mumbled a thank you, though I doubted she heard it. I got dressed quickly, simple jeans, a sweater, and my only pair of decent sneakers. Pulled my hair back. Didn't bother with makeup. I wanted to look normal. Approachable. Safe. By 6:30, I was standing outside a room with a small wooden sign that read Sophie's Corner. I hesitated for a second, then pushed the door open gently. She was sitting on the floor in the middle of the room, cross-legged, still in her pink pajamas with little white stars on them. Her brown curls were wild, like she'd slept hard. A stuffed giraffe was tucked under one arm. She was building something, blocks, carefully stacked, forming what looked like a castle. She didn't look up. Hi, I said softly. I'm Elena. She paused, one hand hovering over a red block, then looked up at me with the kind of cautious curiosity I've only ever seen in kids who've lost too much too early. Her eyes were wide and dark. Big lashes. Quiet. Watchful. I'm your new nanny, I said, kneeling down a few feet away. Is it okay if I sit with you? She didn't answer. Just stared at me, then back at her castle. I took that as a yes. I sat, crossing my legs the way she had. The room was beautiful, painted a soft blue, filled with toys and books, little baskets of stuffed animals, everything spotless. Too spotless. You like building things? I asked. She nodded. Barely. What are you making? She looked at me again, this time with the tiniest bit of trust. A zoo, she whispered. A zoo. That's amazing. I've never been to one made out of blocks before. She didn't smile. But she looked less tense. She reached for a yellow piece, then pushed it into place. That one's the lion's house, she said. Of course, I nodded. You gotta keep the lion comfortable. Her eyes flicked up to mine again. I saw something shift in them, just a flicker, but it was there. I didn't push. I didn't ask about her mom. I didn't say her name too sweetly or try to hug her. I just sat with her. By 7, she let me help her clean up. She didn't say much, but she didn't run from me either. For a first day, that was a win. We walked down to the dining room together, her tiny hand barely brushing mine as we went. Logan Blake was already sitting at the long table when we arrived. He was in a dark gray suit, reading something on a tablet. Coffee steaming next to his plate. He didn't look up when we came in. Sophie slowed down when she saw him. Her whole posture changed. She went quiet again. Smaller. Good morning, I said, trying not to sound nervous. He glanced up. His eyes were ice gray and unreadable. Morning. This is Elena, I said, gently encouraging Sophie forward. We've been building zoos all morning. He looked at his daughter. Did you brush your teeth? She nodded silently. Go eat. She moved to her chair like she'd done it 1,000 times. No hug. No smile. Just quiet obedience. Mr. Blake didn't say anything else. He didn't ask how her night was. Didn't make small talk. He stood after a few minutes, grabbed his tablet, and left the room. I stood there awkwardly until I heard his footsteps disappear down the hall. Sophie picked at her scrambled eggs. Does he eat with you sometimes? I asked gently. She shook her head. I didn't press. I just sat next to her, poured her a little orange juice, and peeled the crust off her toast the way she liked. That morning, I realized 2 things. 1. Sophie was holding herself together with invisible thread, and 2. Logan Blake had no idea how to love someone he didn't know how to protect. If there was one thing I knew for sure, it was this: love and legality do not belong in the same room. But in that house, everything came with a signature. 2 days after I started, Marianne called me into the study. The room was like something out of a movie. Heavy wood shelves lined with hard covers no one had touched in years. A tall window that looked out over the back gardens. A fireplace that hadn't been lit in a decade, I'd bet. And Logan Blake, standing behind a thick desk like he was preparing for a deposition. I closed the door gently behind me. He didn't look up right away. "Sit," he said, gesturing to the chair across from him. I sat, folding my hands in my lap. He slid a folder across the desk. "That's your formal contract." I opened it carefully, even though my palms were sweating. I was never good with documents. I always felt like I'd missed something important, like I'd sign away my future without realizing it. I thought this was already handled. I asked. "It was a temporary agreement," he said. "This is the real one. I had my legal team draft it. It includes clauses specific to Sophie's situation and the expectations I have for you." I tried not to bristle at the phrase "my legal team." Of course he had one. Of course it was drafted. This was his world, terms and signatures and fine print that could decide your fate. I scanned the first few pages. It was more than just hours and duties. It outlined behavior codes, privacy agreements, even a clause about social media use. Not that I had much of an online presence, but still, "You'll see we've included a bonus structure," he said. "Quarterly. Based on performance." I blinked. Performance? Sophie's progress. Emotional development. Academic improvement. Any issues? I looked up at him. "She's not a company, Mr. Blake." His jaw twitched. "No, but I run my life like one. Everything's tracked." I wanted to say something sharp. I didn't. Instead, I asked, "What does progress mean to you?" "She talks more. Smiles. Trusts. Has structure. Doesn't scream herself awake." His voice cracked a little on that last part. Just a sliver. But I heard it. I looked down at the contract again. "I'd like to review it more thoroughly before I sign," I said. He nodded once. "Fine. You have until tomorrow morning." As I stood to leave, I paused. "Sophie's not just your daughter. She's a grieving child." He looked at me then, really looked. His eyes were sharp, but behind them there was something tired. Haunted. I didn't know his full story yet, but I was starting to feel the shape of it. "I know what she is," he said. I didn't reply. I just nodded and left the room, the folder pressed to my chest like a shield. That night, I sat in bed and read every word of the contract. Twice. It was fair. Cold, but fair, and somehow, reading it made me feel small. Like I was another cog in the machinery of this marble mansion. Like even my care for Sophie was something that could be budgeted and incentivized. But then I remembered that morning, how she'd let her pinky finger brush mine on the way to the playroom. How she'd whispered "Zebra House" like it was a secret, and I remembered that I didn't come here to be part of a system. I came here for her, so I signed it, and in doing so, I made a silent promise to that little girl in pink pajamas. No matter what this contract said, my loyalty would always belong to her first, the woman in the portrait. I first noticed the portrait on my 4th night there. It wasn't displayed in the hallway, or over the grand staircase like you'd expect. It was tucked away in the upstairs library, a room that smelled like dust, lavender, and time that hadn't moved on. I had wandered in by accident, following Sophie's little voice as she chased her stuffed giraffe through the corridors. She had slipped behind the double doors and vanished, and when I opened them, I found her sitting on a window seat, humming to herself. The giraffe was tucked under her chin, but it wasn't Sophie that froze me in place. It was her, the woman in the portrait. She looked young, maybe late 20s. Warm brown skin, deep almond eyes, a mouth that looked like it used to laugh easily. She wore a simple pearl necklace and an ivory dress that didn't belong to any particular decade. Her expression was soft. Loving. Still, I stepped closer. There was no nameplate. No date. But I knew it had to be Sophie's mother. "She used to read to me here," Sophie said quietly. I turned. She was looking at the painting, her thumb in her mouth, something she hadn't done all week. "She did?" I asked gently. She nodded. only when Daddy was gone. She liked this room. Said it was the only one that didn't echo. I looked around. The walls were lined with books. Heavy curtains framed the windows. Even our voices felt softer here. Do you remember her laugh? I asked, sitting beside her. Sophie didn't answer. Just leaned against me and stared up at the woman on the wall. We sat like that for a long time. When I tucked her into bed that night, I found an old book on her nightstand, where the wild things are. It had a worn spine and faint scribbles on the inside cover, in the corner, written in faded ink, to my Sophie. Let your wild heart roar. Mama, I swallowed the lump in my throat. Downstairs, the house was quiet again. I passed the study on my way to the kitchen and saw Logan Blake alone at his desk. The door was open just a crack. He was staring at the fireplace. A drink sat untouched beside him, and I saw it for the first time, how grief can look like control. How loneliness can wear a three-piece suit and pretend to be power. I kept walking, but that night, I lay awake and stared at the ceiling, thinking of Sophie's little voice in that quiet room. She used to read to me here. That wasn't just a memory. It was a door, and I intended to walk through it. By the end of my first week, I had started to understand something crucial about the house. It had rules, not the kind written down in contracts or spoken aloud in staff meetings. No, these rules were quieter, older. Woven into the routines and walls. They were followed because they'd always been followed. And breaking them came with invisible consequences. The first rule? Don't ask about the East Wing. There was a long hallway past the grand staircase, behind a double set of frosted glass doors. I had passed it several times, but never gone in. Not once. Every time I even looked in its direction, Marianne's expression would shift. Not angry, just firm. Keep to the main wings, she told me once, casually, while wiping down the breakfast table. No need to poke around in places that aren't relevant to your duties. I nodded. But I wondered, the second rule? Logan Blake does not eat dinner with the staff. Or his daughter. Every night at 6, the chef would prepare 2 trays, one for Sophie, and one for her father. Sophie and I ate together in the sunroom by the garden, her small plate beside mine on a child-sized placemat shaped like a cloud. Sometimes we talked. Other times, we just ate with the soft hum of the garden fountain in the background. Logan's tray was always left outside his study door. Someone, usually the butler, Joseph, would collect the empty plate after an hour or 2. Sometimes it came back untouched. Does he ever eat with her? I asked Marianne. Her pause was long. He used to, she said. A long time ago. The third rule? No one is allowed in the master bedroom. That rule wasn't spoken at all. It just was. The door stayed closed. Always, even Sophie didn't go near it. In fact, whenever we passed it on our way to the upstairs playroom, she would quietly reach for my hand. She didn't say why. I didn't ask, not yet, but the house watched, and I listened. I started to piece things together, like the way Sophie flinched at sudden noises. Or the way Logan would pass us in the hall without looking at her, even though his fingers curled every time, like he wanted to reach out but didn't know how. And the marble, it wasn't just flooring, it was silence. Cold, polished, untouchable. This house wasn't just big, it was a monument to a love that had died, and a grief no one knew how to bury. That night, after Sophie had gone to sleep and the staff had cleared out, I made tea and walked the halls alone, and I felt it, that loneliness. It clung to the air like perfume no one wore anymore. I stopped in front of the East Wing doors. The glass shimmered faintly in the moonlight. I didn't go in, not yet, but I placed my hand against the glass and whispered, I know you're in there. Whether I meant the woman in the portrait, or the truth she left behind. I couldn't say, but something shifted, like the house had heard me. Sunday silence. Sunday was supposed to be the easy day. There were no meetings. No school schedules. No team of chefs coming in and out with plated meals. The staff arrived later. Some didn't show at all. The kitchen was quieter. Even the marble floors seemed softer under my steps, but in this house, Sunday was the hardest day of all. I learned that before breakfast, Sophie didn't run to greet me like usual. I found her curled up on the couch in the sunroom, her knees pulled to her chest, staring at the garden with glassy eyes. Good morning, love, I said gently. She didn't look up. I sat beside her and waited. After a moment, she whispered, Sundays were Mama's day. I didn't speak. She made pancakes shaped like animals, Sophie said. Mine was always a bunny. Daddy's was a bear. I smiled softly. That sounds lovely. She used to sing while she cooked, she murmured. Now no one sings on Sunday. Her voice was small. Too small for a 5-year-old. I nodded slowly and asked, "Do you want to make pancakes today? You and me?" She hesitated. Then she nodded. Once, in the kitchen, we made a mess, flour on the counters, eggshells in the sink, batter in her hair. She giggled once, just once, when I made a pancake that was supposed to be a cat but looked more like a sad potato. "I think it's a hedgehog," she said, smiling for real. "It's abstract," I said. She grinned. "Like modern art?" "Exactly." By the time the plate was full, her cheeks were pink and her eyes were brighter, but the moment Logan Blake stepped into the kitchen doorway, it all vanished. She went quiet. Sat perfectly straight. Her eyes dropped to her plate. He didn't speak right away. He just stared at us, at her, then at the plate of animal pancakes, then at me. "Good morning," I said, trying to bridge the silence. He cleared his throat. "Morning." He stepped further in, walked to the coffee machine, poured himself a cup. His back was straight. Controlled. Sophie didn't say a word, neither did he, until he turned to leave. "Thank you," he said softly. Not looking at me. Not looking at her, just into the air, and then he walked out. Sophie waited until he was gone. Then she whispered, "He doesn't like pancakes anymore." I said nothing, because I knew the truth. It wasn't the pancakes, it was the memory of her hands, her voice, her laugh in the kitchen on a Sunday morning. It was the ghost in the syrup. The echo in the batter. It was everything he couldn't face. That afternoon, I took Sophie to the garden. We watered the plants. Chased butterflies. Dug a little hole and planted a seed she found in the kitchen drawer. She said it was a mystery flower. Maybe it was, maybe we all were. Later that night, as I folded laundry in the guest room, I looked out the window and saw Logan alone by the garden. Standing exactly where Sophie had planted her mystery flower. He stayed there a long time, then he knelt and pressed his palm into the soil. Monday started like any other day, quiet, routine, clean, but I've learned that in houses like this, calm doesn't mean peace. It just means something's waiting to crack, and that morning, it did. It began with a phone call. I was brushing Sophie's hair upstairs, her little legs dangling off the edge of the stool, when Marianne knocked softly and leaned in. "There's a call," she said, her voice tight. "For Mr. Blake. Line 3. She didn't usually tell me that kind of thing. So I knew it mattered. I helped Sophie off the stool and followed Marianne down the hall, out of pure curiosity. That's when we heard it. "No, me, David," I said. "No." Logan's voice was low, sharp, just behind his office door. "Not today. I don't care what the board wants, today is off limits." Silence. Then another snap of anger. "It's her birthday." Her birthday. The words hit like a cold wind. I stopped walking. I turned to Marianne, stunned. "Whose birthday?" She didn't answer. Just looked away. I rushed back to the playroom. Sophie was sitting on the carpet. "Coloring, sweetheart," I said softly, kneeling beside her. "Is it your birthday today?" She didn't look up. Her crayon moved in small circles. "I don't have birthdays anymore." My heart dropped. "What do you mean?" She shrugged. "No party. No cake. Daddy says it's just a regular day now. Since Mama's not here." I didn't know what to say. I just reached out and held her hand. She whispered, "It's okay. I don't like cake anyway." That was a lie. I knew it. She knew it. Later that day, I pulled Marianne aside in the laundry room. "Why didn't anyone tell me?" I asked. She sighed. "Because it's not celebrated. Not since the accident. He's punishing her for something she had no control over." I said, voice low. "She reminds him," Marianne whispered. "That's all. She reminds him." I couldn't let it stand, so that night, when Logan left for a meeting he couldn't cancel, I made a decision. I baked a small cake, nothing fancy. Just a single layer of vanilla with pink icing and sprinkles I found in the back of the pantry. Sophie helped me stir the batter, humming to herself softly, her voice barely above a whisper. We lit a candle, one candle. She closed her eyes, made a wish I wasn't allowed to hear, and blew it out. Then she looked at me and said, "This is the best not a birthday I've ever had." She hugged me tight. her tiny arms around my waist. I hugged her back even tighter. Later that night, I found Logan in his study. He'd just come back, and the weight of the board meeting still sat in his eyes. I made her a cake, I said quietly. He didn't look up. She smiled, I added. For the first time in days. She shouldn't have to smile on this day, he said, almost to himself. It's not a day to smile. I stepped further in. Maybe it should be. He looked up at me then, really looked. I'm not ready, he said, his voice breaking just a little. She is, I whispered. She's just waiting for you. He didn't respond, but for a moment, I thought I saw it, the fracture. Not just in him, but in the marble, a crack so thin you had to really be looking, but it was there, and something had shifted. The photo in the drawer. I wasn't snooping. I need to say that up front, because even now, decades later, it still weighs on me. But I wasn't snooping. I was looking for paper. Just plain paper. Sophie had spilled juice all over her art table, and I was searching the side cabinet in the office, where I'd seen sketchbooks the week before. Logan had given me permission to use anything in there. And I believed him, but the bottom drawer was jammed. I tugged once, twice, then it popped open hard, sending a few folders sliding to the floor, and tucked beneath one of them was a photo. Old. Faded at the corners. The kind of photo that had been held too many times. Smoothed over. Maybe cried on. It was her, Sophie's mother. She was sitting on the front steps of this very house, holding a toddler Sophie on her lap. Laughing. Wind in her hair. Logan beside her, shirt sleeves rolled, his arm resting behind them both, his smile, unguarded, not that tight business smile he wore now. No. This one was real, and it stunned me, because I hadn't seen him smile like that. Not once. Sophie came in behind me, still barefoot from her spill. What's that? She asked softly. I froze. I didn't want to show her without permission. But it was too late. She was already beside me, staring. That's me, she whispered, touching the photo gently. And that's Mama. She didn't smile. She just looked, and then she said something that took all the air from my chest. He never looks at that one. I turned to her. Have you seen it before? She nodded. Sometimes when he thinks I'm asleep, he opens that drawer and just holds it. Her voice cracked slightly. One night, I watched him cry. I didn't know what to say, so I sat on the floor beside her, the photo resting between us, and I said the only thing that felt true. She was beautiful. She was everything. Sophie whispered. A few minutes later, I carefully slid the photo back where I found it. Closed the drawer. Wiped Sophie's hands. And said nothing. That evening, Logan found me in the kitchen, slicing apples for Sophie's snack. You were in my office today, he said quietly. I turned slowly, my pulse jumping. I was just looking for sketch paper. I didn't mean to. You saw the photo. I nodded once. Yes. He stared at me. Cold, unreadable. Then he said, you should have left it alone. She saw it, I said. Sophie. He closed his eyes for a moment. Just 1 second, then he said, that photo is all I have left that doesn't feel like a knife. She didn't ask for the knife. I said gently. She just wants to remember her mother's face. He didn't respond, but that night, I found something new in the playroom, the photo, framed, sitting quietly on the bookshelf, beside Sophie's bedtime books. Not a word was said, but everything was understood, the dinner that didn't happen. He said he would join us for dinner. He really did. That morning, Logan had passed by the breakfast nook, adjusted his cufflinks, and said to Sophie, I'll be home for dinner tonight. Promise. I heard it with my own ears, and the look on Sophie's face, it was like sunlight cracked through a week of clouds. Her whole little body brightened. She smiled so wide I thought her cheeks might ache. She asked me all day what we'd make. She helped stir the pasta, picked the tomatoes for the salad herself, set the table without being asked. She even picked out a blue cloth napkin and folded it into a tiny triangle for his place. Blue is his favorite, she said. We lit the candles even though the sun hadn't set. Marianne laughed softly and turned off the overhead lights to give the room a glow. For once, the house didn't feel cold. It felt like a home. 6 o'clock came. Then 6:15, then 6:30. By 7, Sophie stopped asking where he was. Thus by 7:30, she took the napkin off his plate and refolded it quietly. I told her maybe something urgent came up. That adults make plans and sometimes life gets in the way. She nodded, but I could see the small collapse behind her eyes. He forgot, she said softly. It's okay. He forgets a lot. After I put her to bed, I waited up in the kitchen. The candles had melted down to puddles. His food sat untouched. Cold. Like the air again. At 10:14 p.m., I heard the front door open. Keys on marble. Footsteps across the hall. I didn't plan to confront him. But I stood up anyway. He entered the kitchen and paused when he saw me. You waited up, he said. I nodded. She did too. He took off his watch, set it on the counter. I was called into an emergency finance briefing. He said. Couldn't be helped. You promised her. I didn't promise her the world. No, I said, just dinner. Which, to her, is the same thing. His jaw clenched, but he didn't argue.